They say once is a chance, twice is a coincidence, and the third time is a pattern for most serial killers. From your friendly teacher in school murdering students to the creepy next door neighbor who rapes and murders young girls for a living, anyone can be a serial killer. Today, we look at 10 most famous serial killers of all time. Jack the Ripper. This is the name given to the unidentified serial killer who was active in 1888 in the Whitechapel district of London and its surrounding impoverished areas. Jack the Ripper is described as an attacker who targeted female prostitutes who worked and lived in the slums of eastern London. He removed their internal organs and cut their throats before performing abdominal mutilations. Up to date, the Ripper, Jack, has never been caught nor identified. Jeffrey Dahmer, commonly referred to as the Milwaukee cannibal Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, was a sex offender and a serial killer from America who murdered, raped, and even dismembered 17 men and boys. Most of his murders later involved necrophilia, permanent preservations of different body parts, and even cooking and eating the body parts. Jeffrey was caught after one of his victims overpowered him and was sentenced in 1992 to 15 terms of life imprisonment. He died 2 years later after his imprisonment at the Columbia Correctional Institute after a fellow prisoner beat him to death. Gary Leon Ridgway. Popularly referred to as the Green River Killer, Gary Leon Ridgway murdered numerous women and girls during the 1980s and 1990s in Washington state. He is one of the most prolific American serial killers in history according to confirmed murders he had committed. He was convicted for 48 separate murders, but he confessed to twice the number, where a majority of his victims were sex workers and women who were in vulnerable situations. Luis Garavito, referred by the media as the Beast, Luis Garavito is one of the worst serial killers of all times. He is believed to have murdered at least 300 boys, but was sentenced to 1,853 years in prison on 139 counts of rape, torture, and eventual murder of 147 boys in 1999. However, he was sentenced to just 30 counts, as this is what is maximum limits by Colombian law. Can you imagine he might be released early for good behavior and cooperation? Someone make me the president of Colombia. This is outrageous. Andrei Chikatilo. He was active between 1978 and 1990 in Russia, but was caught in 1992. He was referred to as the Butcher as he sexually assaulted, killed, and mutilated 53 women and children. In his defense, he said that, and I quote, "When I used my knife, it brought psychological relief. I know I have to be destroyed. I was a mistake of nature." End of quote. In 1994, he was killed by a firing squad. Number 5. John George Hay. He operated in 1940s and was popularly referred to as the acid bath murderer. Apart from being a serial killer, he was also a professional conman as he lured the wealthy by using deceit and charm, and later on would shoot them. After that, he would dissolve their bodies in sulfuric acid, forge their papers, collect on their life insurance, and also sell their possessions. John was caught and convicted for murder of 6 people, although he claims to have killed more than 9, and in 1949, he was sentenced to death by hanging. John Wayne Gacy. Wayne operated in Chicago, Illinois, between 1972 and 1978. He would lure his victims with the promise of money or work to his home before strangulating them with a tourniquet. After killing them, he would bury them under his house and later off dispose their bodies in the Des Plaines River. He was convicted of sexually assaulting 33 boys and men and was sentenced to death row in 1994 by the lethal injection. Bundy. Theodore Roberts Bundy was a necrophile, burglar, rapist, kidnapper, and a serial killer who assaulted and killed at least 30 young girls and women during 1970s. His known number of committed homicides was 30, but his real number is expected to be higher. He won over his victims with his charismatic and handsome traits and approached them in public places either by impersonating an authority figure, faking disability or injury, and then overpowering them and assaulting them in isolated places. The Zodiac Killer. Although the identified is still unknown, the Zodiac is one of the most prolific serial killers of all time. The killer operated in late 1960s and 1970s in Northern California, and he murdered 7 people, where 3 were women and 4 were men. The killer would send taunting letters to the local press, which included 4 ciphers, and out of the 4 ciphers, only one has been solved. Finally, at number 1, we have Dr. Harold Shipman. A doctor is supposed to save lives, but for the English Dr. Harold Shipman, this was not the case. He was responsible for the murder of at least 250 people. He injected his patients with a high dose of diamorphine, which led to their death, and later forged their will so that he could inherit their money. He was sentenced to 15 life sentences and would never be released. He hanged himself in prison cell in 2004. Well, that sums up our top 10 list of the most famous serial killers. Think I missed anyone? Well, let me know in the comment section below. Kindly subscribe to our channel for more.